All right. Welcome to the Event Modeling and Event Sourcing Podcast with your hosts, Martin and Adam. Hello,
Yes,
Martin.
hello again.
Yes, hello
Here
again.
we are.
Recording a little later than we usually record, but still made it on the day. So it's always a pleasure to catch up with you, Martin, on at the
Absolutely.
end of the week.
Yeah.
We always have a little chat
Today was a
before
little
we
bit longer,
record.
wasn't it? Today was a little
Today
bit
was a little
longer.
bit longer, but there's a lot to share. So we're going to share that with you. We just wanted to kind of get our ducks in a row and get um, the agenda more or less formalized. And just a couple of announcements, just a reminder about Martin's course that's going to be going live on the 28th. I saw a post. You are almost ready. It's almost ready. So
Yeah.
this is very good news. And so I'm looking forward to the 28th of it going live. As we'll get to later on in the podcast, we'll find out why this is important. This course is quite important, and of course we have the workshops coming up. So there is part of this whole cycle of all the different resources available to you. We're going to have that as a part of a complete package, of course, with Martin's book and the courses and now the workshops and then the conferences and all these other things that we're going to have. That's part of the picture. So anyway, look for
Yeah.
more announcements for that. Anything else from announcement side, Martin, that you want to say?
No, not this
No?
week. So
Okay.
full focus on the course right now.
Excellent. Yeah, here in North America, I think it's a short week. Monday is a holiday, so
Oh,
for a
yes.
lot of places. So, but because we're international, I will be working on Monday anyway. So yeah, looking forward to that. And yeah, so let's get going with our topics for this episode. And the first one I want to start off with is AI. And boy, oh
Oh,
boy, did
what a topic.
yeah, a very hot topic. Of course, there's a lot of perspectives on this. A lot of people are very optimistic, and then there's a lot of people that are very pessimistic. There's a lot of people that see AI as incredibly helpful, and a lot of people that see AI as incredibly risky, whether it's your job security or whether it's robots taking over the planet. So it's all over the place. And I wanted to discuss one of these topics that Grady Booch brought up, highlighted actually, and I'm going to read it and I'm going to superimpose it on the screen. If you're watching the video of this podcast, you can sort of see the tweet or X post or whatever you want to call it these days post, and it's actually the original post is on Reddit. I think Grady did a screenshot of the post on Reddit and then commented on it. Let me see if I have it still on my screen so I can read it out somewhere in here. Yes, there it is. So Grady Booch sends out thoughts and prayers to this poor AI user. And the title is, "My project became so big that Claude can't properly understand it." And so obviously we're hinting here at context windows, but let me read out the post and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so it says, so I made a project in Python entirely using Cursor, Composer, and Claude, but it has gotten to a point where the whole code base is over 30 Python files. Code is super disorganized, might even have duplicate loops. I don't know what duplicate loops are, but anyway, this person's a novice, they said already. So,
Yeah.
and Claude keeps forgetting basic stuff like imports at this point. When I ask it to optimize the code or to fix a bug, it doesn't even recognize the main issue and just ends up deleting random files or breaking everything completely. I have zero knowledge about Python. Okay, well, there's problem number one. But still, the promise of AI is that you shouldn't have to know it. I agree to it to some point, right? So anyways, I have zero knowledge about Python. It's actually a miracle I got this far with the project. But now it's almost impossible to keep track of things. What do I do? I already tried using cursor rules, but that doesn't seem to work. So, Martin, what are your first impressions before we dissect this and then give our own way of using it? So, what's your first impression
Well,
on this?
first of all, that's exactly what happens everywhere right now.
Yeah,
Everywhere. So people are using AI to generate code. It's like wild, wild west, really. And then they wonder why they end up in this mess. So this
yeah,
is a perfect post, really perfect.
yeah.
This is what happens right now.
Yeah, anything in particular that jumped out at you? Any of these sentences? As I see a lot of points that this person brought to light, little by little. One of the things that I said earlier already is that I have zero knowledge about Python. It's actually a miracle I got this far. So
Yeah.
This is a light into the low code, no code trends where people want to drag and drop a solution together. We already had this like back in Visual Basic 3 days, and I'm sure there was other drag and droppy IDE type of, not really IDE, but like solution components you could glue together by connecting boxes and filling out some input boxes in them and make something, right? We saw that with if then that, and we saw
what you see is what you get. Editors everywhere.
Yeah, and even UML, when it was snatched away from Grady Booch, who posted this, it ended up being like, we want UML to be a programming language, but unfortunately it wasn't. It was a really a representation of the solution in drawing. So I don't know, but we certainly have a history of trying to do this, and so this is another one. I think it leads to other posts that I've seen about AI. Is that it's not that we're not going to need programmers, but this is just like compilers were another step up over programming machine language and other things like that. It's another leap of ability. I guess it's an order of magnitude productivity increase where you need new languages almost. And I think event modeling is a new language for being able to do programming more effectively because it's the right level of abstraction again. We moved from object-oriented to something else now. And before object-oriented, we just had procedural and all this other stuff. And before compilers, we handwrote the machine code and things like that. Is that your impression, kind of from this zero knowledge about Python comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So lots to talk about. I mean, this could be a very long episode, but we will try not to belabor it. I just want to get this out so that people that are listening can kind of start thinking about some of the different ways that AI is good. I think we hinted at this last episode, where we already saw that event modeling really is kind of building up on the time frame with the context window, quote unquote, kind of growing as you move left to right and you have more and more events in your history. So it's analogous to how a lot of the large language models work and all that. Stepping back a little bit, just this like zero knowledge of programming. Imagine you had some knowledge of programming instead of this person having zero. What AI is doing is removing the excessive amount of Googling, like especially if this person is going to be using Python and they have zero knowledge of it now. Now they're probably going to have some rudimentary knowledge of it. They're going to be an intermediate or a beginner than intermediate. So what AI is doing for them effectively within Cursor, et cetera, and all that is at least removing the 4 hours of Stack Overflow browsing that afternoon. Like that 4 hours disappears. It's completely replaced by a couple of questions for 2 or 3 minutes within their IDE and an auto suggestion of what the correct syntax is instead of wasting 4 hours. So there's that order of magnitude jump in productivity, even if you are someone that's somewhat technical and can do that. So it's kind of bringing up the absolutely inexperienced person to at least be average or become average very quickly,
that's also how I use AI. That's what I do most of the time. I have a very specific question and I get my very specific answer within minutes instead of Googling. For half an hour.
This was another like depressing thing about getting into the industry after we were talking about this before about programming at home as a kid in the late all of the 80s, most of the 80s for me, and early 90s is your computer's by your bed and you have all this time to to go to your desk and go to sleep after. But in those days there was not a lot of technology. There wasn't like 1,000 JavaScript frameworks. There wasn't 100 different languages or 1,000 different languages. So for me to program was okay, I'm doing basic and then I'm doing assembler in Commodore 64 on the 6502 or 6510 processor. every day, right? Small like instruction sets, relatively speaking, to what we have in processors now. So guess what? I would actually know how to do stuff. There was no Google, first of all. So if you wanted to learn something, that was a huge resource uptake.
Yeah.
Like you needed to go to the library, and obviously all the good programming books were always checked out. You had to be on the waiting list for them,
Yeah.
actually that was a real struggle back then. So the replacement for Google was the only thing I had was a reference manual for there wasn't a how to program your Commodore 64 in assembler. There was a reference book for all the processor instructions, and just alphabetically.
Yeah. I
And no
remember.
sample programs.
I
Sorry, go
remember
ahead.
very well that there was this magazine. There was this programming magazine. I cannot remember the name, but it came every week, and you had to type everything
Oh
from the
yeah.
magazine. Insane,
Yeah,
insane.
those small books of programming of like programs for different video games. I remember
Yeah.
Logger was one that was for the Commodore 64, but also the same version in different forms of BASIC was there for the Apple II or the Spectrum or whatever. And this was a platformer of a guy chopping logs and jumping on platforms. But surprisingly, a lot of these programs were really difficult to type in, because if they were going to be performant, there was part of it that was really assembler, but you couldn't force the person that bought the book to have an assembler with them to type these things in at least LDA or whatever the instructions were. They're literally a basic program with a basic loader at the top, and then the rest of the lines of the instruction set were data statements. You could do like line 200
Yeah.
data, and then you could list 20 values. So you'd be like putting in, okay, data space 12 comma 201 comma 3
Yeah.
anything between 0 and 255 basically. And then the loop, all it did was look at the data and put it in memory, and then do a system call to jump to the very first part, and that was the actual program. So a lot of these things were absolutely painful, because the instructions, while some of the simpler programs were in BASIC so that you could see what it was, a lot of the ones like video games that a kid liked were like your keyboard entry of numbers essentially, and it's really tedious without a numeric keypad, because the Commodore 64 didn't have a numeric keypad. There's probably add-ons you could buy, but a kid didn't have it. So you're going across the top row, punching all these numbers over and over again, like an entire afternoon. Needless to say, I got pretty bored of that pretty quick. But yeah, this was a good nostalgia. The reason this is relevant, though, we're looking at what AI is doing for us. So our equivalent pain today of look 5 years ago, you go to a boot camp or something, maybe 6 years ago, and you want to become a programmer. And holy smokes, do you have any number of ways to that? Okay, you have higher order topics like object oriented versus functional. So you learn how to do pass functions and scopes and variable visibility and public private members of the syntax of these languages. And then you have to jump in. Well, if you're going to be really effective, you better know this JavaScript framework, and it has these opinions about how things are put together. And you're like, oh my God. And there's 12 of them. There's another one next year, right? And then by the time you're done your boot camp, you're done. And so it's just it was painful going to Google and looking at, okay, we have a new React thing. How does this component, propagate its properties down to its subcomponents, and like what's the lifetime of this thing, and like, oh, we better use Redux in this, and oh, look at that, now it makes it easier. What else do I have to learn? It's like,
don't forget half of it completely undocumented. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe documented, but then also the search engines get confused, because there's all these discussions on forums and posts. So that when you search some things, sometimes you get a Stack Overflow. Sometimes you get some person's blog. Sometimes you get a GitHub entry. Sometimes you get a GitHub issue. I don't know. It's all over the place, right? So
one good example where this applies still today is Spring Security. So I work a lot with Spring Security. If you Google for Spring Security, you get there are so many different versions. Spring, that's the framework.
Yeah, Spring, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are so many different versions. When you Google, you need to have luck to find the right one. It's really insane. That's exactly that.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I've done my my live streams on something as old as just Express, it's like I'm not doing anything fancy. I really want to show the core of event sourcing and event modeling, not to swim between choices of frameworks and whether I'm going to do a single page app or do posts and gets of pages. I don't care.
Yeah.
The advantage of doing something like Express is that there was, it was used long enough in enough projects that the large language models learned that syntax, and JavaScript was popular enough as well. And I think that this person that made this post is using Python because that seems to be, quite a lot of code for that was used in the initial large language model experiments and tests and all that. And it's also is a large code base out there. There's a lot of people writing Python scripts for all sorts of things. So I think Python was still, the king of languages there for a long time. So that's kind of like why this person ended up in that. But what's the other thing that strikes me about this whole thing? And of course, just to go back, it's like thoughts and prayers from Grady Boots, like Grady Booch, that we have this this adoration for AI and so much trust given to it without fully understanding what it does. And I think this person that's doing this as a beginner, or maybe they know, maybe they have zero knowledge about Python, but maybe they actually know other languages. Although I'm skeptical because I think
I
they're
don't think so. It sounds like
because talking about duplicate loops and some of these other things, I think they're more of a novice. I could be wrong, but anyway, that's the impression I get. But so the important part. So let's get to the meat of this. The context window is what's killing this person here, right, Martin?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So
in the beginning,
what would you tell this person? How would you explain this to this person to help them?
But basically, the problem is that the bigger the project gets, the bigger you need a context window. So you need to tell the AI needs to understand more and more and more to make the right decisions, to make the right things in the project. And this is why in the beginning it works well. For the first few hours, for the first few days, it works very well. Until
I would say it doesn't work well immediately. I think I've had problems right away, and maybe because I don't have any custom pre-prompts that I'm using. But anyway, continue. I'll give my 2 cents after.
I mean, if you get started, so typically bootstrapping a project works pretty well. If you use a framework that is well known, most LLMs, most AIs can bootstrap it very well. But the more code you write, the more modules you have, the more the AI needs to understand. And at some point, the context window simply isn't big enough, and then they start to make errors. They make the wrong assumptions. They miss things out because they forgot about the beginning of the context window, and then everything goes wrong. And from then on, basically, it's pretty hard to rescue this project. It's gone.
You mentioned modules. I think there's also a problem with the fact that large language models are behind the latest technology by X number of years or months because of the long time that it takes to make a model. The amount of training that has to go into it, and also the opinion of what people feed it. So what I've seen as well is that you get suggestions that have outdated libraries, and so you have. I mean, it's getting like you have to eat. So the problem with that is they have to eat up a lot of the context window now by feeding the page, a current page of the API of the current version, if you're going to use that. And you have to do it in piecemeal. And then the problem is that once you've switched to like the new version and then you try to go back to solving your problem, you don't want to use up that context window for that API that you just fixed. So now that goes away. And the next prompt will probably forget or not know the intricacies of that API, and it'll start to impose the old version of the API no matter that you're using the latest version of the library, because it has no knowledge of that latest version of the library in this next prompt, right? So there's some very tricky things that happen with AI and the context windows here.
I mean, the context windows increase. If you look at how the context windows increased over the last few months, so they
Mhm.
are getting bigger and bigger, but
Yeah,
this doesn't
Gemini,
solve
I
the
think, is
fundamental
like
problem.
the latest one that's been huge. So I'm looking.
Yeah,
I want to try and plug in some of the Gemini stuff to see, but I don't want to. I think this is a law of diminishing returns. I think there's a greater problem here, which is scope. The fact that there is, for someone that's just trying to automate everything, and like their system will hit a glass ceiling, because even for a human being, you cannot think about 20 different things. This is why we have abstractions. This is why we chain together multiple processors to to simplify what we're looking at. Give ourselves a
yeah,
small world. And I think this is what event modeling and event sourcing are brilliant at, is really rigorously showing those smaller contexts, right? So I'm kind of leading you into what you probably want to say. So sorry, I'm probably leading you into what you want to say with how event modeling guides the context window, because you're doing some automations, right?
I mean, how I use it is really I'm working with very small context windows. So I never put in my whole system into the AI and ask it, give me the next thing, give me the next slice or something. What I give the AI is always basically the slice, the current slice, and the context. So what are the events that go into the slice? What are the read models that are connected? Basically the connected elements. All the connected elements, this
Yeah,
is most of
yeah,
the time enough context
yeah,
to
yeah.
make the next decision. Give me the next slice based on this context. You don't
I
need
think
more.
the problem is that the IDEs don't do that for you automatically, and I think this is where people need that help to understand how to use um, event modeling and event sourcing. Because I mean, I'm trying to be when I'm doing this live stream coding this simple application, I don't do what you're doing. I say, and I'm starting to see this, the problem with too much context,
Yeah,
and it losing its way. Um, but there is an initial, especially if you're doing something like event sourcing and event modeling, where there's a specific way of programming that's better, the multiple model. That is not what the large language models have been trained on. So at the very beginning, the large language model actually works against you when you're doing event sourcing. That's why I raised that little flag there when you said, like, in the beginning it does everything correctly. Yes and no, with a caveat. I think if you're doing like it has been trained on a lot of event based systems. Some of them are event sourced, and some of them are event sourced the way we want to do event sourcing. Because there's still mistakes that people make in event sourcing, sharing read models and things like this that are come up quite a lot.
yeah,
Um, and and so what happens is that you may get um, an event streaming version of event sourcing.
yeah,
You might get, like, just the initial things that pop up as suggestions, especially when you're trying to write the infrastructure and all that, is a bit clumsy. I find that I have to guide. It's like, no, you need to have events array as an argument, a command, and you have to return an event. This is the
yeah,
signature. And once I have a few examples of that, like maybe one or two or three slices, then it's bang, 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 really quick, right?
yeah.
Once I have one of those given when then sets that I have, I was quite surprised as how good it was. And I pinned that tweet or X post or whatever a long time ago because it just blew my mind as to how good it is. So there's definitely this sweet spot. So you can have this, bell curve sort of maybe it's not a bell curve. Maybe it's quite good at the beginning. It gets even better, but then there's a drop off where just too much is going to give you problems. And I think it starts to, I don't think it's hallucinating. I think it's kind of like a victim of the last thing it's heard, because the context window is only the files that it was able to fit in there. And it makes, I don't know if how cursor is implemented underneath, whether it does a few passes before to say, well, what do you think are the most relevant files for this next change and things like that. And one of the problems that I'm facing is that I'm putting everything into app.js. And so it's becoming, 1,000
Yeah.
lines and longer in terms of code. So that's eating up a lot of the context window. Maybe that's not
Exactly.
a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm starting to see this drop off, as you say. and all that.
It still needs to understand everything. So even if it's only 1,000 lines, it still needs to understand how does it all relate to each other, and
Yeah,
even that could be a problem. There are too
yeah,
many ways to make decisions, and that
yeah.
maybe is a problem.
So I think just having a graph of, so the event model is a graph, and it's a directed acyclic graph like Git is. Everything just
Yeah.
moves in one way. But you can take, like you said, you already gave away the answer early on. You spoiled it for everyone
Ah,
that you have to follow these connections. You have to follow these connections. So let's say I'm doing this slice for this, this green box here, and I'm following. Let's have AI write the UI and the reducer for the green box. What context do I give AI to do it properly? Well, you could do some of the preliminary context limiting actions to basically show that it's only connected to these events, um, and that's it. You might want to walk the tree back a little bit further to give it some sort of an opinion as to, out of all the workflows, the blue lines above, we're talking of it's involved in just this one, but it's part of the context is that you're making this unconference organization thing, and so you get to I think you have to um, tailor make the context, and I think event modeling gives you a really good framework for understanding your information flow architecture and the structure of information flow,
yeah.
so that you don't run into this problem. Like, I make this. This person has gotten to the point where the whole code base is over 30 Python files.
I mean,
Code is
that's not a lot,
super
right?
disorganized. So that's one thing. Code is super disorganized. So that's one thing we won't have. Our code is always sitting in these command handlers and these reducers that are doing the green boxes, the projections, the read models, the state views, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
This is the same pattern over and over again. And I think that's another problem, is that people just invite the next solution in whatever LLM comes up with, and it's another approach to what could be done another way. And I bet you anything, if they just reprompted it, they'd get a totally different solution,
Yeah.
accomplishing the same thing. But the problem is that you're getting a really heterogeneous distribution of how code is written, and so there's no rhyme or reason as to why one thing is accomplished one way or another. There has to be a level of consistency, right, where you can have the dynamic middle juicy part, but you have these boundaries at the top, and as you exit these blue and green boxes, to kind of do that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly that. And one of the reasons why event modeling and AI work so well together is we have these patterns. There is not so much variance. We have a handful of patterns, and give the AI a few examples, a few implementation examples, and a little bit of context, and almost anything is possible.
Yeah. So we could have a really large code base for a very large system in a large enterprise and be highly effective at using AI, because the context window that we feed that AI is relevant to whatever the connections are to that slice on that event model.
Yeah.
And you can, for context, it's up to you. I think I would only give it the events that it cares about, and the event that it leaves it's a command, and maybe the UI that's involved, and to make this thing kind of guess as to how things are working, which it did well. Like if there's menus and things like that, you could have either the JSON structures of the UI for the other screens, so things are consistent, or a screenshot of all the screens together to give it context that this is how the page looks, and of course where it sits in terms of all the workflows. What place does it have in here? Above me, if you're watching a video of this, we have setting dates. Right, setting dates is part of this wizard interface, and it comes after naming the conference, and it comes before adding the rooms. So, AI may have some training in it that might be advantageous to have that. And AI has been really good. When you are at that peak of AI performance, it's actually better than some of the people that are really good already, because we're human and we'll miss things. And I keep using this example. I missed in one of the tests, in one of the given when-thens that it implemented for me correctly on the first try, just from a screenshot of the given when-thens from the event model. It found that I wasn't checking. I had no assert that the old name after a rename still, that it didn't exist in the collection, right? I was happy just to find that the new name is there and all this, but
Yeah.
there should have been an assert to say, well, you better not find the old name in that collection. It found it, right? So it's really good. It's that baseline. So it kind of says that, okay, even if you're really good at something, you're going to operate way higher than the large language model. Large language model is at the average level. But what it showed is that even if you're really good, when you make a mistake, it drops you below the average level, and it'll
Yeah.
catch that, right? So it's actually quite good. So you know, at least you're not making stupid mistakes, because even experts make stupid mistakes just because we forget to dot our I's and cross our T's sometimes,
Yeah.
because we're tired or it just happens. So you know, that's actually really good. So
Yeah, and that's also what I'm using AI for. So just give it the context, give me all the test cases for it, and
yeah,
put them on the board.
yeah,
Amazing. Or
yeah.
are there any test cases missing in my setup here? Yes, you missed this one. Great, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, back to this post, and Grady's attitude is really good, because I think there's been an from a certain percentage of people an unhealthy um, jump into AI that, oh, programmer jobs are going to disappear. I love AI and all of this stuff. Like, it is dangerous, and I think Grady Booch points out that, you know, this extreme is not healthy. Nor is some of the mainstream buy-in that's overly zealous. I think they're counting on it to do too much or whatever, or whatever it is. I agree that you know, Grady's critique of society's current um, you know, love affair with AI is, it can be really bad in a lot of cases, and this
Yeah.
is exactly it. And I think what's going to happen is that the people that bet too much on AI, they didn't bother hiring good people, and they limited their you know, they let go too many people. They're going to have this initial thing you talked about really really good project starts. They're going to have
Yeah.
5 or 10 projects in the next year that are going to be like, oh man, this is going so well and all that. And it's going to put pressure on AI, but it's going to hit that wall of, you know, it's going to hit that peak, and then it's going to come tumbling down. And all of those projects are going to end up just like this post. I have no doubt about it,
Yeah.
because the cyclomatic complexity, the amount of dependencies, the dependency hell that you get with the mainstream way of working, which is a single model, just doesn't scale. And AI is going to, because its context window limitation, is going to make it even worse. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have to tease apart these giant messes. So, you know, even now and in the previous
Sure,
years,
this is possible. I'm not even sure this is possible, because what is currently being generated by AI is much worse than the legacy systems we deal with for the
well,
last
I
20
wouldn't
years.
go that far. Sometimes I've seen some
I'm not
legacy
sure.
code that
Oh, I've seen really bad things, both from AI and from humans. But this AI generated code is really the problem is it's really unstructured,
yes,
and this is what you have in legacy systems. You most of the time have some kind of structure, but these
yes.
code bases, they are completely unstructured, and this is not, you cannot rescue them. Many of these code bases, you will not be able to maintain them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think because of the training set for large language models, they wanted them to be as smart about everything.
Yeah,
And then so you have every opinion in that on how to solve
exactly.
a problem or whatever. So and we see that all the time. I think you have to, like, when you're going through cursor AI and you let it autofill stuff, like, oh, why are you doing it this way? I have to go in, delete the whole thing, and retype, like, okay, you should be using a reducer here. I don't want a map. I want a set. I want this. I want that. Why are you using this? Right? It's you almost. There's many reasons for it. I mean, it can't read your mind. like how you're going to want to implement stuff. So you have to either put those in prompts or redirect it somehow. But people that are not experienced are not going to be able to do this, and they're just going to accept everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I see how people work currently. They get a suggestion and they simply accept it because they think, okay, the AI knows how that works. But if you
Yeah.
ask it again, you will get a completely different proposal, and
Yeah.
you can then accept this. But in the end, you will have a mixture of different paradigms and ideas, all within one code base, and that is much worse than current
Yeah.
legacy systems, if you ask me.
So it's not just that people have to learn how to. People don't just have to learn how to make AI work. They still have to know that AI was trained on sketchy data, or at least a mix of data. Like there's
Yeah,
randomness in there, and that randomness goes against what we want when we build large systems, which is consistency, a
yeah,
cadence to getting the work done. We don't want
right.
pockets of complexity and risk to blow up. We don't want these, and this is what we're doing in event modeling, is really making everything explicit so that we know how the information will travel, and that's going to be a guide to how we're going to be curing these potential risks. And the way the risks usually end up being shown in traditional ways is, we have the epic story, the extra large T-shirt size in your stand-ups or
Yeah,
your planning meetings, right? Your sprint planning meetings, and all of those things. Um, that's what we do not have at all in event modeling. We do not start unless we know what slices are there for people to build, right?
yeah,
And the slice is not complete unless this information flow, and that everything's connected as it's supposed to be, so we don't have a failed sprint because we didn't really understand what we're heading into. Anyway,
yeah.
what's your take on this?
I completely agree. And well, I, I really think using code generation and AI, I think in a few years we will no longer write code. I'm 100% sure about it. But what we need to do is we need to provide the proper guardrails for the AI and for the code
Yeah.
generation. And this is
I,
exactly that will be the new job of programmers, providing the guardrails, providing the real system design so that AI can do its work within a
yes.
very small context. And this is how it will work.
Yeah.
It will not be that you won't tell the AI, I need this system, do it for me. This will never work. Never.
I agree. I think the other, you hit a nail on the head about not using programming languages, but I think there's a slightly different take on this, and that we will be using different programming languages. And these programming languages will be more in line, like you said, with system design rather
Yeah.
than dealing with the minutia of the details.
Yeah.
Because we'll start to have things that, um, there's what's it called? Uh, Design by contract or whatever. Those types of approaches where you're trying to really mathematically limit the possibilities of the input and output by having really good pre and post conditions and the
Yeah.
signatures of these, and the type system is going to support you. That's not human friendly, right? I think what we're getting into with event sourcing and event modeling is the idea that there is this emergence of a programming language that is for humans, right?
Yeah.
You look at the evolution of computing, and the beginnings were people plugging wires into different sockets, and then people typing ones and zeros, well, probably just numbers, hex code or octal. I think it was the octagonal with octals, right? That they were doing first, 0 through 7s or something like that, three bytes at a time, or 3 bits at a time, or whatever. I don't know, right? Something like that. I forget. Maybe not that. I have to look back into how people punched in zeros and ones first, and
All
there was
right.
punch cards, and
Yeah.
then there was, for the first time, there was like interpreted languages, right? Like compilers and things like that. People could actually, write the word print. That was more human readable to like but it was still talking about what the machine wanted, not what the human wanted. The
Yeah.
machine wanted to be instructed in a specific way to print something. And finally, we're flipping it so that the machine does what we want. So we're talking about systems, and we're going to be using terms like, we have given when then. So we're using human friendly setups of like, hey, given that these things have happened, now we're at this point in the timeline, I want to do this. Did that work or not? My test will ensure that it works. Now the machine can do what it needs to do, but it's now the other way around. And I think this is the big flip with AI, is that for once, we were under the illusion that machines were doing our bidding, but we really were. They really weren't. We were being still subservient to the machine. Compiler error, syntax error, runtime error.
Yeah.
We didn't, it's really us trying to appease the machine. And now it's, I think, the other way. We're getting really into Asimov, fantasy novels here about the robots of the future. But it's sort of like we are at that turning point, I feel.
Yeah.
Because when I say something and I make an event model and I say something in human terms and I throw that screenshot into the IDE and the solution comes out working as I want it to be, and I didn't touch any of the code to do that. This is the first time that I have this feeling that, I am instructing the machine. I'm not just appeasing the machine to understand what I want to say.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah.
How does that
sound? I thought a lot about this, and not only AI has a context window, also humans have a context window. And I think it's not by coincidence that event modeling works so well, both for AI and for humans, because it's in this exact sweet spot that simply everybody can understand. Humans, machines, it simply works everywhere.
Well, that's a really good way to put it. Like, yeah, we do. We call it cognitive load for humans, right? Like, I don't know how many things I have to remember of what I did in the system before for me to be effectively pushing the correct next button. So I continue with that. Like, oh, where was I? And this is why people drop off from your website. All sorts of interesting things.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you think that the context window in Bard or Claude, or O4 or any of these models, do you think the context windows are anywhere near our cognitive load?
No.
Context load? I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
Well, I don't know. I think we're near, because I think that, especially like with, I'm going to beat up on an old horse here, like test-driven development. Like, oh, we need these units, and we need to not think about what's happening in the backlog yet. Those are future tickets. We're not going to look at them. You need to focus. Don't get distracted by gold plating or future proofing or whatever. So I don't know. I think we've been trying. I think our context window, you're right, is much larger, but I don't think it's been it hasn't been helpful, because we have these.
That's true.
We have our own guardrails. Like, hey, stop coding the part that I'm going to be working on. Right? You're already influencing the way I'm going to be doing things by doing something here. So there's reasons why we want to limit the windows, but I think you're right. I think it's much a problem the other way for humans, and for large language model use, the context window is too small to do things. But I'm not sure. I mean, with these randomly generated things, would a larger context window really help? I still don't think it would.
I don't think so. It will not solve the fundamental problem, no matter how big you make the context window.
Because it's heterogeneous. I think this multi-agent pass-through I think that's where we're going to have a lot more. Like, there's going to be a agent that looks at coupling or dependencies. There's going to be one. I think eventually what will happen is that these agents are going to distill to what we're doing in event modeling right now anyway, because it's all going to boil down to information flow. And everything else will be subservient to it. So as we go through these, tackling this problem of my project became so big that Claude can't understand it, it's going to be solved. It's coevolution. I think we talked about this coevolution multiple amounts of times on this podcast, but Martin Kleppmann was doing stuff with CRDTs to have this, ledger-based stuff, talking about consistency between edits between different nodes. And then we had stuff in event sourcing, and we had stuff on the blockchain. They all co-evolved to really make use of immutable additive only data stores and ledger stores as
Yeah.
being the superior way to solve a majority of these problems, or just make entire problem sets disappear. So, the same thing's going to happen here. We're going to think about, is Gemini going to be better? Like, let's say this person that's complaining about using Cursor because it uses Claude 3.5 to make these 30 Python files. There is a Gemini project where you can get the largest context window that you can. So my bet is that even if this person used that they wouldn't be able to get out of it. And simply because of the heterogeneous nature of what AI spits out in general, that you have a mishmash of patterns and ways of doing things that that ends up in a large project. I think it's fairly consistent on like one page of code or one function or a set of functions where it does that, but you can quickly see it break apart as this either reach context window bound limit, or you start to get influenced by infrastructure code is seen as your state change code or state view code. It doesn't discern. It doesn't have that opinion, at least not as good as it could. Anyway, those are my initial findings, and I think I'll be wrong. I think eventually that the training will get better, but it's going to be a long time, and I think it's going to be multi-agent.
I think what will happen is we will see smaller models that are specifically trained on working on these kinds of code bases. And if you combine these smaller models with event modeling and this very focused small context, this will make a big change. We are not yet there, but we are not too far away.
Yeah. And I think the tooling that you're building right now to add to make Miro be more guided for event modeling, which is great, but then the actual code generation that you have is guided by this. And I think you already said that you already are following the graph of the event model to limit the context window. Yeah,
I do. So what happens currently if you build an event model in Miro? I have this JSON structure, which is basically exactly this directed acyclic graph, and you can just select basically how many slices do you want to give the AI, and then you can prompt it to make a decision. Give me the next slice. Give me the missing GWTs. Give me the fields that are missing. Infinite possibilities if you have the context ready.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay, so how do this actually is a good segue to our next topic. At last, this is going to be a longer episode. I'm so sorry.
again.
but so okay. So now put yourself in a place of someone that's working in a larger organization, right? I have clients that have lots of legacy projects. They have new initiatives, new projects, new services that they have to write. Have to integrate them with the old ones. They have to update the old ones. They have to retire some old ones. And meanwhile, they're being bombarded with advertising how AI is just doing everything for everyone for free. and they feel frustrated because they cannot take advantage of it because their code bases, like we saw already, like this is just someone making their own project that's probably small. But now you look at an enterprise where it's non-trivial. Well, that's just not going to work at all, is it? You can't just feed AI all your code bases from all your projects on a company that's been around for 10 plus years and has got billions of dollars of income and all of this stuff. There's absolutely no way that you can say, hey, robots, do all the work for all the people I have to hire. You have to see this as...
For one of my clients, what we try to do is we try to use AI to analyze a massive database schema just to understand what happens there.
Right.
It was not possible.
Explain this code to me. Don't change anything. Just explain what's going on here. Yeah.
No way. So for projects of this massive scale, it simply doesn't work. No context window will solve that. It simply doesn't work. Right now. Maybe in the future, but right now, no way.
Yeah, you can do some cursory sort of refinement or reduction of what's going on. You can start to capture, maybe maybe you could make AI make a script that could properly grep for the places where you hit the database in this, 1 million lines of code thing. And it might give you, it might save you the time that you yourself would be thinking of what to search for, what to put in the search window, how to,
Of course.
we have a lot of dependency analyzers already, like static, like analysis tools for code that do some of these things. So there may be like the output of those could be meshed with as part of the context that you're giving to the AI to help it along to look at the right parts. But really, the context window is limiting for those things, and so you're asking the AI to just help you walk that. But what's the answer to not build systems like this?
Yeah, I mean, of course, AI helps with this. There's no doubt about it. But the problem is to find these contexts to give to the AI. What I wanted to say is, you cannot simply throw this big project into an AI and it will solve all your problems. It's simply
not at all.
And if you try it, it's just a stupid approach.
Yeah, so one of the problems is that when you're working with these large code bases and there's a lot of risk and all that, people feel they can't hire junior people anymore because they know that the junior people are going to be, it used to be, I don't want a Stack Overflow developer because it's just starting. I don't want to, but it's the same thing now. I don't want to have a junior developer because I know that they're going to just be hitting tab on the autocompletes and I'm going to get random stuff in there and that's going to be a risk to my project. So it's really about now understanding how to guide companies to implement the guardrails so they could start to again employ junior people, because that need hasn't gone away. I mean, this example that Grady put here is not going away. It's going to be there for enterprise people. It's not going to be there just for the hobbyists at home throwing together their own Python project. It's going to be the normal for every project out there. So, and this is the, this is the part where I think we can start to talk about expert help. And we watched a little video of, how can you learn these things by yourself, right? When you want to learn, how are you going to learn event modeling and event sourcing, right? Well, there's the presentations out there, right? So you can get books on event sourcing, you can get a course on event sourcing, and there's a bunch of workshops that are related to event sourcing maybe. And then you might have some people that have done event sourcing in the past, and you might be able to help them in a workshop that's a private one with them, and then maybe you can hire them to help you. But they're not experts, right? And so I think our next point is, like, we've been talking about learning large language models, which learn from what we've done, but humans have to learn how to navigate this. And so this funnel of teaching yourself, reading a book, having your whole company read a book. I mean, this is one of the things I always present about. Like, you can't get everyone to read a book in your organization. Take a course. Do an online course with exercises, go to a public workshop to interact with others, to actually put your hands, like, get hands-on experience with other people to do that. Do a private workshop to do that with your colleagues in your own domain and all that. And then finally implement real systems. Apply what you learned to actually help your company be more effective, not have as many defects, deliver way quicker. All of these things that you're learning all of these things for. But a lot of these, so there's two classes. I think we discussed this before the podcast. There's getting better tools. Let's say I want to use, Trello instead of Jira.
Yeah.
I'm going to get Trello training because it's lighter weight than Jira, and people aren't going to get distracted. Better tool for the same thing. That's one type of training. Then there's the other one, which we're in, which is, this is a different way of working. There is no direct way for the traditional model to evolve to be event sourced and event modeled. You can't keep being 10,000 hours, 20,000 hours of experience on traditional ways of working to get to the level of quality and speed you get with event sourcing and event modeling. It's a local maxima, right? So this is especially important when you go through this. I'm seeing presentation info. I'm reading a book. I'm reading Martin's excellent book about event modeling and event sourcing. I'm taking his course. I'm attending the public workshops. I'm attending the public webinars. I'm taking a private workshop from Martin. And now I'm getting help, from Adam and Jake and all these other people that are in the industry that have had enough experience to implement it. That is kind of the way that you really need to have the expert help with things that are totally brand new, right? You don't have. There's a very helpful video that we watched together about this, and it's really about having someone that's been there. Like, you've been there for a number of years. That you've done so many projects on this. You've written books about it. You've gone through so many things. Our company has gone through a decade of just doing event sourcing, just doing event modeling, and it's that. I think there was an example of someone struggling to play guitar, and they sound really badly, and they go to see an expert for half an hour or whatever, and they start to, and the expert says, "Show me how you're playing guitar. Play something." And after 30 seconds of them playing, the expert says, "Oh, your fingers at the wrong angle. You're laying them down too flat. They should be angled this way, and that's going to make your notes sound crisper." In 30 seconds, an expert has unlocked months of frustration for this person learning to play guitar. And it's no different with event modeling and event sourcing. And the problem is that most people have the experts you hire at programming generally are experts in traditional approaches. They're actually so ingrained in the 10,000 hours of experience of making a bad thing be usable that they don't actually have a way of being an expert in a totally different way of working. So someone that has 10,000 hours of experience, but it's not in event sourcing, they're not going to be able to help you do event sourcing. In fact, they're going to destroy your attempts at doing proper event sourcing. I would much rather have junior and intermediate people surrounding me as the people learning event sourcing and event modeling, because they're not biased with the 10,000 hours of traditional development. And we saw the same thing with Agile years before, 2 decades ago, where people were so, they had their 10,000 hours of experience in Gantt charts and planning and all of this stuff and other nefarious management techniques and whatever Agile was rebelling against. And so it took, many, many years for most companies to now adopt, sprints and retrospectives and stand-ups and iterative, with development with feedback loops. Now we're on the next stage. It's like, okay, we got to swing the pendulum back again. But again, this takes a mind shift. Now, not only are we including planning, but now we're including the various structure and abstractions to be not a single model. I have a user table that's used everywhere throughout all my workflows. No, I have many projections of what the user data means to many different parts of different workflows, many different models. This way of working needs its own 10,000 hours. And if you don't have it, you need this expert stuff if you want to do it in a reasonable amount of time. So I think what I see a lot of times is companies think that, yes, you do need to have your own guys do it. But if you're training, I think another example is, like, if you're going to go climb Mount Everest, do you want to do it with all these level 2 guys that have just started? Or do you want to do that with 2 or 3 level 1,000 people that have done this multiple times? I think the answer is pretty easy.
Yeah.
You want to climb Mount Everest with the most experienced people you can get, because it's a high risk thing. So, why we do this, why we have this community, why we have each other as partners, is so we can scale our approach to be able to help as many people climb their own Mount Everests with the best help that they can get. And it shouldn't stop at just the instruction piece, right? Yes, you do have to have hands-on. Your guys have to do it, but they will repeat so many of the bad things, such as sneaking in, sharing read models, polluting events with superfluous data that it is not needed for the state change.
Yeah. Putting in
I have
optimal
all
data.
of these things on the back of my hand. I can tell you in an instant, as I'm seeing you implement stuff, it's just like the guitar player guy. Martin, you or me, Jake, or whoever is out there, Chris, these people that have done this for decades, and all our team at Adaptec, we can see your implementation, and as you're coding, say in 5 minutes, that's going to cause you problems. And we can stop it. Without us, you're going to head down doing the wrong thing for 3 months, mostly applying traditional approaches to something different, and expecting and being disappointed.
Because
so,
we have seen all these errors, and we made them ourselves, right? I made
exactly.
These
yeah,
multiple times.
We've been there, done that. I remember this was back in 2017. We were still looking at like, well, we got some of these efficiency issues with read models. Why don't we just like manage the dependency on the common green box? Boy, was that a mistake. We've made the mistake of making multiple services because we were guided by domain-driven design. There's a bounded context, and we should have these things living separately. Big mistake. We will never split things into separate services until the need arises, because it just ended up adding extra work. It had absolutely zero benefit to the end solution. We went and did, we need Event Store DB for these as the standard. Big mistake. 99% of our stuff would have worked with flat files or a regular database table with events serialized for 99% of the problems out there. There's a few like trading systems that are super performant, but they're the outlier. But everyone that was listening to everyone else, the non-experts, the people that were tire kickers, or the people that were experts in the regular thing that happened to do a project in event sourcing, were looked at as experts on event sourcing as well. Absolute garbage feedback. They made the wrong recommendations throughout all those projects, and people suffered. People needlessly climbed hills and mountains to put in something like Event Store DB, where just getting going with event sourcing on flat files or a database table would have done the trick and would have saved months and months of work. Just like, why do you need that level of throughput? You might scale to 10,000 transactions per second. Well, I don't think you'll have a lot of problems if you're having that kind of income.
Yeah,
I think you're getting way ahead of yourself. But that's so. Experts will tell you other things. It's like, what is the history of this thing, right? And one of those is event sourcing was born. At least the current inception and Event Store DB, for example, is based on the need for scaling the right side, especially for very fast and performant trading systems and things like that, which 99% of the solutions out there, your regular insurance company, your point of sale system, that is not the reality that they live in at all.
It's not a trading system you're building. Most of them. Yeah, and the big problem is, unfortunately, many of these projects fail, and then event sourcing is blamed. It simply doesn't work, but the whole approach was simply wrong. It doesn't.
Well, they weren't really. They were really just stuck in trying to piecemeal. And when you have a different local maxima, there's a trough where you have to drop what you're doing in the previous one to adopt all the other things on the other side. Yeah. It's not a Coke or Pepsi, very similar decision. Like, it's just a drink. It's entirely different. It's a different way of thinking. It's not a substitute product. We're not going from Jira to Trello. We're basically thinking of information in a totally different way. We're making core decisions such as, by default, I don't want to lose information. By default, I want to have a functional, mathematically correct way of dealing with state. By default, we want to have the fewest patterns possible to solve the majority of our problems in our space. These are very core things that don't exist in the traditional system. In the traditional system, you have, hey, buy this patterns book with 50 patterns, and then think about which one might be good for the thing you're working on today.
All of them.
It's horrible, right? So maybe it's not horrible, bad word. It's just different. It's not the same thing. People that are experts in applying the 50 different patterns, from head-first design patterns or whatever, are not going to be experts in event sourcing, right? And if you want to have, okay, I want all the things that event sourcing and event modeling gives me, I'm going to do it this way. If you do it by yourself, you're going to still have to walk that journey. You're going to have to gather your 10,000 hours, but you won't even start on the proper 10,000 hours until you learn all the mistakes you made and correct them. And that's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So do it with someone that's already an expert, like Martin or myself or Jake or Chris, or there's a ton of people, but you need to make sure that these people have been doing this correctly for 10,000. You don't want the tire kickers. You don't want the person that is an expert software developer and they happen to do an event sourcing project. You want people that only work in event sourcing. You don't want the heart surgeon that, he's done a brain surgery once. Do you want your brain surgery to be done by the person that's an expert heart surgeon but happened to do one brain surgery? I don't think so. Same thing here.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's like the idea of expert help, because I've been it comes up over and over again.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you know what I see often right now? Companies ask for training on event modeling, but they only want the training. They want one training, they want 2 trainings, and then they want to go on their own. Which is, in my opinion, it's a very bad idea. It's simply, it won't work. It won't help. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, it's like climbing Mount Everest. You want to go to the base camp and get training from the experts. You're at base camp together with the experts. They're right there. That you could take them with you. Like, you could take them with you, but say, I'm going to save some money. I'm going to just get you to tell me what's there, how to set up my tents, how to not freeze to death, what time of the day, how to use the weather reports so that I can walk more or less that day, how much to eat, how much to drink, when to start the oxygen. Just tell me these things, and then I can't afford you, so I'm just going to go and do that by myself. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah.
What's sad though is that this idea that, like, one person wants to learn a different way of working, and if they do it by themselves, it adds like 10 months to their cycle or whatever, 3 months, 4 months. That's assuming they have the space to do just that and make all the mistakes and all of that. With a company and the amount of people there, that is multiplied. That is not just 10 months. That is 10 months times 20 people, times 50 people, times 100 people. You do the math on that, and in terms of time and in terms of money, I mean, there's projects that I know we saved millions and millions of dollars, and we were worried about a $10,000 or something so that the company could make 10 million. It just doesn't make sense. So there's always like this small time thinking, and there's also like I think there's a problem with maybe some corporate culture where they were beaten up by a lot of bad vendors before, that letting someone in saying that I've trusted these vendors in the past, and this is just another vendor that wants to take work or wants to do whatever. It's like, no, if you think that this is some Scrum training, or this is some Twilio, or what's it called, Trello training, or some other thing, it is a completely different world. It's a much better world, but it's a different world. And if you don't have the experts to say, hey, you're putting your fingers wrong on the guitar, then you're going to continue to do things wrong, even though you've got the material. someone with a guitar book can read it and they can miss that. They think they have the angle right. It looks like the picture, but they don't. And the expert tells them why not. Why the pressure is at the end of the fingertip, not in the middle of the fingertip or whatever. They're double jointed. Maybe they have to change something. That is what an expert's there to do, to unlock all those issues. So, and also to basically problem solve some things that would take, like some things are still out of left field. Like we typically have some issues that may come up later, such as event streams getting too long, or some other performance things, which just happen with it would happen with any system, but they're handled differently in event sourcing. You can go there and fix it immediately and show how it was fixed, and maybe do that with them for the next fix. And that shaves months and months of frustration. I think what we're guilty of in this industry is really being too optimistic on how long things are going to stay, and we oversell things to upper management and all of that, kind of like what we want to appear, and playing the optics game. So it's easier to tell your boss's boss wants to hear how easy and cheap and free something is, so that they could get what they want. And they're fearful that if they ask for something that's too costly, that they'll get no and they'll get nothing. So I think there's this management level problem where people don't want to ask for too much, but then when they get it, that's not enough to actually do it correctly, and they get blamed for doing it wrong. So I think it always has to bump up. And so this is, we've had the biggest success with projects where we were involved from the very beginning, preparing the info. Now there's the book, so we didn't have the book before, so thank you, Martin, for that. People can read the book. Now they're going to have a course. Now they can, we've done workshops. We've basically streamlined that to just take the workshop, go in the workshop with us, and we'll do that. The ones that were the most successful always had us helping the implementation. I look at a number of our clients that are that we've had in the past 10 years, and the ones that we're still working with, and they're saving millions of dollars on development costs. They've basically eliminated rework. They've eliminated all of the top 100 software problems. They don't have migration issues. There's no such thing as a schema migration. They just don't even worry about it. But I don't know, that initial cost is too much sometimes. So I don't know.
And I see this cost comes back at you every time. I've seen it very, very often. So I give this initial training, and then I leave. Teams work on their own. 2 months later, they call me back in because it doesn't work. And looking at the model, you have to correct almost everything, because it's simply there are so many mistakes, accidental mistakes in the model, that you basically need to start from scratch, and then it gets even more expensive.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this. This is why our marketing officer, which I'm finally getting, was talking about, like, what is Adaptec Group, and that's why we're partner companies. Like, your company is a partner company, Jake's company is a partner company, Chris Condren's a partner company. All of these partner companies are under the umbrella that you can say that these people know how to do event sourcing, and that means and event modeling. So that means when you are trying to scale up these systems, you can always have this community of people and these companies that actually have done this professionally at fixed costs and regular rates or whatever, to be able to involve them, right? So I think what's happening is really the idea that I think what's happening is AI is causing more issues. So back to the first topic we had, I think that's all interplays now, because I think what's happened is that the developer skill level has been downplayed as important because the AI can do it. But it's also affected that, okay, if you're talking about event modeling and event sourcing, that's still a little more technical. And so you're thinking, well, AI will take care of that too. So we kind of have it coming from both ways. And then so I'm glad when Grady posts such things like, yeah, you think you're going to learn event modeling and do an event model with AI? It'll definitely be in the tools to make you go faster, so you're not typing as much. But the actual skill of being able to say how this information system is structured is still something you need to say, this is what I want. This is what the business will be able to use.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely right.
but anyway, it's I understand. I think we have to be fair to people that are engaging with us as vendors. They have the first of all, they have the history of bad vendor interactions before, especially when it comes to outsourcing. There's a lot of like offshore horror stories that I hear about, but we
Yeah.
fix that with fixed costs. That's fine. That's not an issue. And then there's also the vendors that just under delivered, right? And so and maybe they were there as consultants, and they were just band-aids, like selling band-aids on top of the problems. So we see a lot of that, and I guess it's like this is what we're offering is just a transition, a transformation, not a digital transformation. I think we had this digital transformation thing as a selling point, that we are digitally transforming your. I think we're fundamentally changing the ideology about your information in your company. Like, we want your information to be as important as money is to an accountant. Like, we want it to be
Yeah.
managed properly. That's why these things behind me are structured with a purpose. Like, it makes it predictable. It's all that. I see all sorts of different types of diagrams, and like, oh, we got this arrow, this to join this circle joins this thing, and it's like a free form. People can be expressive. Yeah, sure, that's great to get the ideas out. But when you have to implement and you have to hold people accountable, you need a ledger. You need like structure. You need these steps that explicitly were either done or not done.
Yeah.
And so you can catch where you went wrong. And I'll say it again, like, these things are way more dependable than even this opinion of regression tests. I will say it again, that I will throw away all my unit tests if I can have my events in my event store and an event model. Absolutely, hands down. Won't even think twice.
I agree.
Simply because this way of working, we removed the rework. Like, we're not refactoring all of this stuff. So even if I manually tested one of these slices, because I guarantee to myself and those around me that I'm not going to change the code, that continues to be dependable. And so, what is I said it in the last podcast, I think, how much is that unit test worth if it's not giving me any valuable feedback? If you didn't have this way of working, then yeah, there could be all sorts of dragons in there that you need the safety net for. But here we just have the same type of function. Inputs are the previous events in history, the command, and it only spits out an event or throws an exception if it went wrong. It's mathematically provable. There's no external calls from within that. How much value is that unit test giving me if I know that I'm not changing that code? Right? Anyway, but those are the things that you need the expert help for, is just to give you the courage to experience that at a fast pace. That initial 30 seconds, you're holding the guitar wrong, you're pressing on the strings in the wrong way, that will unlock you, instead of struggling, sounding awful for the next 3 months, 4 months, until maybe eventually you'll realize yourself. But yeah, it's all subtle. Anyway.
I mean, that's also why I put out all this stuff, the book, the course, everything. It's just to open this world of opportunity so people can see it. It's not, I don't expect someone to read the book and take the course and then go out and implement a full system. I don't expect this to work. It's the people should see how that works, open the mind, and then they will still need expert help if they build systems at scale, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can, yes, there will be people that have the incentive and the motivation, and they will see this as, I love this, I want to do it, and they will quickly go, or more quickly than others, go and do it by themselves somehow.
Yeah.
But they're the exception.
Exactly.
So, like, I think with anything, you have to, in order to realize the benefits earlier, you need people that have the experience by your side. And I think the problem is also the fact that people don't realize they're in teams, and that they overestimate how the team has said yes. They might say yes because they want to disappoint you as a boss or someone they respect, but they have their own motivations, they have their own timelines, etc. So even though you're trying to do event sourcing and event modeling in your company, and you have a position of leadership, Um, know that the people around you um, have their own lives and their own ways of working, and that even when they say yes, you're still subject to how they learn, how they implement, and all of those things are risks. And you by yourself cannot, as effectively as an expert, catch them right away. You will catch them, but it'll take you a long time. And in that time, guess how much of the solution was already built the wrong way, or inconsistently, or all these other things. So having,
Yeah.
a lot of times what I say is like, and it's kind of funny how hard of a sell this is. Like, look, develop one service or part of a service. We can drop our regular stack in and have it deployed and have a core part of that thing done to be tested within a couple of days. No, 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 no. We want to do it our own way and all that. They don't even want a cookie cutter thing to start with. And I don't know why this is. Like, there's this, we must have the best talent internally only. It's a risk to the ego of the people inside. It's going to cause political problems. It's like,
It doesn't fit into the enterprise architecture. Is also
it doesn't, whatever it is. There's a ton of these excuses, and it's like, do you want to work in event modeling and event sourcing in this, as close to this holy grail way of working, where there are no problems with regressions, where you have no schema migration problems, where you have these all these issues like blue-green deploys by default, all of these benefits? Why do you want to struggle? You can backfill everything. It's kind of like what we did with event modeling and TDD. We said, like, we reach the goals of TDD without you struggling through the TDD, and then you can learn along the way all the TDD stuff. But at least your solution has been built in a way that's amicable to what TDD wants, with the goals already. So there's nothing wrong with that. To have an example, like, this is what your solution should look like again. And so, it boggles my mind how many companies want to unnecessarily throw away. Maybe they think that they're missing a chance to learn, and that they're not going to learn if they're not going to have the pain. Believe me, there's plenty of pain with the next set of requirements. But wouldn't it be nice to look at an example of, like, what works flawlessly, that has has the code structure that worked for hundreds of other clients over the last 10 years that are doing only event sourcing? I don't know. They want to invent it themselves for learning purposes or ego purposes, that we can't have our architect look like they've taken direction from someone external, because that's now, they're not justifying their salary because they're not the ones producing these things. These are hard questions to answer, and a lot of it is very personal, right? I mean, I went through all this kind of stuff, like, are you the guy that's going to solve all the problems? And while yes, you can get stretched too thin as well, like, there's too many people you have to help, especially with a new project too, like new approach, right? How many people are going to have to help now? If you are the person bringing in event modeling and event sourcing, and you have 2 or 3 teams, or 4 or 5, worse, to educate them on all of this, and to overlook all that. How many PRs are you going to go through? How many pull requests? How many code reviews are you going to do yourself? It's just crazy. So don't. Get some help. And it's not that this is hard. It's just different. And so you need to help the rest of your organization unlearn. It's not just that you've unlearned and learning a new thing. You have to help. That has to scale. And you can't do it. Well, you can, but it's just going to take longer. In terms of doing it efficiently, you can't do it efficiently yourself. Or organically, event modeling and event sourcing does grow within the organization. But again, it's like 2 to the power of X. You can start with X equaling 1, sure. But wouldn't it be nice to start with X equaling 10? Like, how many months is that for that multiplier to explode, right? So that's what you need. Anyway, it's kind of it's come up. I think we talked about this expert help before our last podcast, before we started talking, because we have a little catch up, and we in the event modeling and event sourcing community, we all have this this same type of issue that comes up, and it's entirely kind of interpersonal, management level type of decisions, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And so I think what we wanted to say is that don't be it's not an ego thing. Don't be afraid to ask for expert help. Like think about playing a guitar and getting expert help to that, or think of climbing Mount Everest and doing it without people that had done it before. These are things that you should apply in life in general anyway, not just to event modeling and event sourcing. If you want to be good at something and be effective, then don't try and save money or think that you can learn better by yourself, or maybe you can't take constructive criticism from people that have more experience than you in something, right? Maybe that's a lot of the problems there, is that the ego may actually be also protected by, is there a potential for someone to make me look not so smart in front of my peers, and I have this high position of being architect or something, right? You have to be just human and say that I only have 24 hours in the day like everyone else, and my life didn't include event sourcing for a long time of my life, and so I don't care how smart you are, you just don't have the experience, and
Yeah.
and that's it. So anyway.
Yeah. And we talked before the podcast. We talked about this blind spot, and I think this is a really important point. From within the organization, from within the team, you think you're doing it correctly, and you cannot see what you're doing wrong. You only see the result, and the result then oftentimes does not work. It doesn't work, and you simply cannot see, why doesn't it work? I did exactly what Martin wrote in the book. It doesn't work because there was this small tiny thing you did wrong, and this is the reason, but you cannot see it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, eventually the book and the material will all complete, but then, we can say the same thing about Agile. It's like, oh, the latest Agile books are probably the best. Like, Kent Beck probably has the best idea about Agile, but it's 20 years in.
Yeah.
So everyone's been, unfortunately, if you want to do Agile best, why wouldn't you want him to help you to be there? You wouldn't have to wait 20 years for the book, for the latest article. So yeah, blind spots are huge, and a lot of times by the time the blind spot topics are covered in books or courses or whatever, or just that they're buried in a lot of material, and you don't have the experience to put two and two together, that part of that video or that chapter applies to this way. You just don't have enough hours in that way of working.
The book has 600 pages. The course has, I don't know how many hours. There's a lot of stuff in there. You cannot remember everything. It simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
Context
exactly.
Window. The context window.
Yeah, context. Yeah. And when you're learning, your context window is very small. You can only concentrate on a lot of stuff. The experts have feelers for all the different things that can happen. They have the experience to be able to spread themselves thin because they can catch these things within minutes. It's not something they have to look at for a long time. So whether it's Martin, Chris, or Jake, or any of these other people, get help, and we can do it. We have Adaptech groups, so we can do this. We have 12 to whatever people on the bench, 15. Martin, you're scaling up. Jake is scaling up. We can also combine all of these things. So if you have a really large project, there is no shortage of people that can guide you in this. And so if you're trying to do event modeling and event sourcing and seriously do it, get people that have experience with it. Right now, the market's really good, right? But for hiring people and subcontracting people, because everyone's thinking AI is going to do everything for them, so the market's horrible for getting employment as a programmer. So this is actually a really good time to say, okay, who can I find that is only done event modeling and event sourcing, especially, either one of those, exclusively for the 10,000 hours of their experience. Get them in there. That's going to unlock everything. But don't do this like, oh, I just want the instruction. Get their on-site help, like regularly, for at least a month, for at least a year, for at least a half a year. or forever. Like some of their clients, we just sporadically go back for 5 years. That's fine. It's not like we're there 24/7. We're there, maybe once every 3 months, once every 6 months for small chunks that are
Yeah.
important. And that's totally fine. What, you want to hire someone that's going to cost, 150,000 a year just in case that might pop up, and you can give them other work so they're no longer an expert in event sourcing? Yeah, don't do that. there is the like, hey, you have plumbing in your house. Do you need a full-time plumber? No, they're subcontractors because you only need them when the plumbing breaks or you need to change something in the plumbing. Same thing here. Like, this is like, you don't need an employee to do everything all the time. So get these people on board, get them for 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, get them to come back every 3-4 months after that. Help with maintenance, help with new features, help with a new service. That's what's going to, but don't do it without experts if you don't have to. And, yeah, if you're at home experimenting with this, fine. Make your little Python project, and maybe this guy should, that we're talking about with Grady Booch, maybe he should actually read, your book. Maybe he should read about event modeling and event sourcing. Maybe understand the context window, and even without knowing any programming, he could still solve this issue by looking at a workflow view of what he's trying to accomplish, and actually see that he can bite off small chunks of this elephant that's been created for him.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was an awesome discussion, Martin. I thank you for sharing your experiences throughout this journey, because it's nothing's easy. Yeah. Nothing worthwhile in life is easy. How's that? That's a good one.
True. Absolutely true.
If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. All the worthwhile things. Yeah.
I really enjoyed this discussion. I think we made a few very good points, both for AI and for the expert help. And why am I so eager to help other companies? Because I struggled exactly with this. I did this for years. I learned this for years, and I struggled again and again and again. And I know it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, same with me. And you know what? What's funny is that I did the same thing. I was like, I'm going to do event sourcing and DDD and all these different companies, and it was an uphill battle. It was, I needed someone, and the tough part was, even when I was asking for getting someone in, like an Eric Evans or whoever, into the company to help, it was like pulling teeth. We don't need experts. Like, it was just like, oh, what's this money being wasted for? Meanwhile, I was seeing what they were wasting money on.
Yeah.
In terms of other, it just made my head like scratch. Like, you have literally an entire roadmap at risk from slipping because of issues with quality and delivery times and all of this. And you don't want to spend this much. Yet I see you spending this much on, like, the Christmas party, on these other things, on, like, I don't know, some questionable hires for other things. It just, it doesn't make sense. So I understand the frustration. And I think, we've been, like, all of us have been in there. And I think both of us have started companies so we could escape that, and that we could help others at least have an environment in that. So at least we have an environment where we only do event modeling and event sourcing, and that people that are working with us, they can work with our teams to experience that as well. But then, there's a thing called an ask hole, right? You ask advice, and then you don't do it. You do it like, and we get that a lot. Like, we get it from all sorts of, like, cloud vendors and all that. It's like, okay, what's the best way to do this? Okay, well, you probably should have Event Store DB because you have performance stuff, and this is our standard stack, and you'll be set up in a week. Say, okay, well, thank you, but we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
Well, why did you ask? I don't know. I mean, so there's that, and I don't know if it's I don't know. There's a whole bunch of variables here. It could be ego, it could be management pressure, it could be budgetary pressure, it could be all of that. But just be aware, be very self-aware of what forces are at play from keeping you from surrounding yourself by experts. Right. That was one of the things that I really wanted to get across, is that you get really good by being surrounded by experts. You don't get really good by being surrounded by a whole bunch of average people or below average people, you know.
Yeah.
So this is a really important thing, because as a person that's in a leadership position, a team leader or whatever, how do you at your work have any option to surround yourself by experts? It's all shadow ops. It's you going to a conference, you going to a meetup, you engaging in the community, after hours when you get home. That's very limited. You There has to be a place and a means for you in a leadership to surround yourself with enough experts day to day, so that you elevate yourself and then can bring up everyone else with you. So
Yeah.
I think that might be the harder part of convincing management, is that, yeah, the architect you hired, they're human too. They need help to move up. Everyone does. We all have only X amount. You want them to like look after all your teams and then also get better? Not going to happen if you don't surround yourself with people that can help you get to that next level. And it's not just about that they can't because they're not smart enough. It's just that you're not giving them the resources and the time to be able to do that. So anyway, that's anything else to add? I don't know. I
I
was
don't
pretty
think. I
excited
think.
with
I
this
think
with
we
this little
covered it
thing that we talked about.
in
So
detail. But we
so
are a little bit over time today, right?
yeah, that's fine. Sometimes we get a longer episode. Maybe
Yeah.
people will like it. Anyway, so just to close out, definitely workshops coming up. I have to put up the links. Again, I got my Stripe done, but this week was very busy. So I will get that done, and then of course February 28th, the course is
Yeah.
out, and then of course the conferences are still being planned. And I think Jake's opening up his company as well this week, and so yeah, look for that. Also, didn't get a chance to record with Chris Condren. We'll probably do that next week instead, as a short week here in North America for next week anyway. So we'll see if we can do that for Thursday. So the book still selling incredibly well, I'm sure. Definitely go to Amazon and LeanPub. LeanPub is the digital copy. Search for event modeling and event sourcing. It'll be there. I think it's event modeling and event sourcing.
That's
Those
the
are
URL.
single words hyphenated in the URL. But if you search on Amazon for event modeling or event sourcing as one single word, both of those words together, then your book comes up. So definitely get a print copy. Oh, by the way, I wanted to thank you for. I think I finally got.
Oh, it arrived. Yeah.
Because we had a postal
Nice.
strike here over Christmas. When Postal Service really wants to make a point, they make sure you don't get your presents on Christmas Day. So that was a very, very nice gift that came late. But I remember being so excited, and I was actually quite happy to get my physical copy before you got your physical copy.
Yeah.
But I guess the printing services are faster in Canada than Germany. So anyway, it's been wonderful. I've been giving this. I've bought many copies. I've been giving them away to people. So thank you for the signed copy. This is going to be something I treasure for the rest of my life. And I like that you have nothing to say, just a little picture of you on the back.
It's my intention. It's intentional. Yeah.
That's really good. So Martin, thank you so much. We definitely had a longer episode, but I think so much had to be communicated in terms of just the kind of attitude and feeling about all of this stuff, and like some of the important topics like AI and getting expert help through this time when the industry is changing, and how to not miss out on working in effective ways, and not get stuck by all the turmoil that's going on. So hopefully you'll find event sourcing and event modeling a set of guardrails to keep you on track throughout all the churn that's happening in the industry. So thanks, Martin.
All right. Thanks.
All right, and we'll see everyone next week for another exciting episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.